Thank you for a very generous introduction. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so happy to see rain. It's been so hot, I heard they put a fan in the debt ceiling. That's it, no more, unless you have one. That's better than that. So I'm just going to read a few short passages from my book and then open it up for questions. And thank you so much for coming. It's really nice to see all of you. This is from chapter 7. It's called Zach, Tia, and Rocky, a Russian white and his German shepherds. And the Russian white is a cat, and the German shepherds are, well, you'll see. I hear the dogs long before I see them. They bark and growl as I steer my small SUV onto the edge of the asphalt driveway. They bark and growl as I sit, staring through the windshield, ogling the spectacular view of the Gallatin Valley and surrounding mountain ranges. They bark and growl as I walk toward the large Tuscan-style house perched on the west flank of the Bridger Mountains. The curved walkway is lined with well-tended flowering bushes and native grasses. Near the front door, a wooden rocking chair covered by a flowered cushion stands next to a small metal table. It looks like an inviting place for morning coffee and contemplation, or it could be without the barking dogs. Through expansive floor-to-ceiling windows, I see a matching pair of German shepherds, leaping and snarling with a vigorous determination to defend their house from my intrusion. Propped against a section of window glass is a sign that declares, "Beware, German Shepherd on duty," which seems quite unnecessary. The closer I get to the house, the more frantically furious the dogs become. Nothing about them looks one bit friendly. For a moment, I consider leaving, despite my invitation to be here for an interview. A trim, middle-aged woman with short salt and pepper hair opens the door when I'm still 10 feet away. Of course she does. No need to ring a bell or knock at a door on this house. The dogs bolt past her and rush outside, circling my legs. The volume and intensity of their growling and barking increases, although I wouldn't have thought that was possible. "Come in," the woman shouts over the canine din, waving me forward. She acts like everything's normal. For her, I guess it is. I follow her into a spacious entryway, adopting a sideways gait to keep an eye on the snarling dogs. The skin on my legs feels taut, like it's on high alert, expecting teeth to break through it and go for the bones underneath at any second. I pull a deep breath into my lungs and solar plexus as we walk inside the house. I try to distract myself from my fears. I focus on the woman's sporty sandals and her thick hair. I think about where she might have bought those sandals and refresh my lifelong futile desire for better hair. Inside the house, I take another deep breath and contemplate a large, noisy, abstract painting on one of the walls. The woman pushes the massive, ornate wooden door shut behind me and turns. "This is Tia," she says, pointing to the German shepherd with the orange collar. "Hey, Tia," I say, leaning slightly toward her, extending a damp palm out a couple of inches, my non-dominant hand, just in case. Tia doesn't seem at all pleased to meet me. She backs away, woofing. The woman swings her arm toward the other dog. "And this is Rocky. You can always tell it's him because his collar is black." Rocky is even less pleased to meet me. He bares his teeth and snarls, leaning back until most of his weight is on his hind legs. He looks like he's ready to launch at my throat. Instinctively, I angle away from him. "Be nice," the woman says calmly. Calmly? Well, I'm about to be mauled. She is calm. Rocky ignores her command and continues expressing his displeasure with a series of threatening growls while we walk into an enormous kitchen dining room with ridiculously high ceilings. German shepherds are inherent, loyal, and loving dogs. I know this. The first dog I ever lived with as an adult was a German shepherd. Gina was sweet, loving, and smart enough to learn how to ride with me on my small motorcycle, a Honda CB175. She sat between my legs as I drove, gripping the gas tank with her claws to stay upright around corners. We were a spectacle cruising the streets of Miles City, Montana in 1972. Despite my history with and love for German Shepherds, I'm a little freaked out by these two dogs. And the mayhem of aggression and barking, amid the mayhem of aggression and barking, an ancient instinct urges me to flee. I keep reminding myself that German Shepherds are lovers. Gina behaved exactly like Rocky, fierce when anyone tried to enter my apartment, but docile and sweet-natured when she felt safe. My experience up until this moment, anyway, matches what I know about the history of the breed. In her book, Rin Tin Tin, Susan Orlean chronicled the development of German Shepherd dogs by Max Emil Frederick von Stephanitz in 1899. She writes, "This new breed, von Stephanitz imagined, would be smart, athletic, and loyal to the bone." Nearly 125 years later, Rocky is an excellent example of von Stephanitz's success at breeding for loyalty and loving devotion. I'm sure he will fight to the death for this woman. He's just doing his job, I tell myself, along with another reminder to breathe. In the kitchen dining room, I gawk at immense white marble countertops and tastefully ornate cream-colored cabinets, while trying to focus on what the woman is telling me about her expectations for a pet sitter. Meanwhile, Tia and Rocky carry on with their vocal protests. Mid-sentence, she suddenly turns to the dogs and says firmly, "Rocky, Tia, stop it." They do not stop. To me, she says, "Please sit," and points to a dining table, a massive, highly polished wooden plank that can easily accommodate 12. I sit. At least one of us is obeying commands. Glad to see the forest fire smoke go, but it wreaks havoc on voices. So the subtitle of this book is Critters, Careers, and Capitalism in Yellowstone Country, and I bring in a lot of my careers, one of which was being a cast driver for movies. So I was actually a card-carrying transportation, teamster for a while. And I was working on an Oliver Stone picture in Memphis. And this is just a scene, something that happened one day of the many days that I was there. I was driving for 5 weeks, but this is just like a few minutes. And I was in vans and Chevy Suburbans, or what I drove cast members around in. Shortly after I parked a Chevy Suburban near the set, located in downtown Memphis, the door on the back passenger side opened and a production assistant helped Courtney Love climb up onto the seat. She wore heavy makeup and a skimpy dress, her costume for the scene. She looked so thin, the word skeletal popped into my mind. She held her right hand aloft like the queen poised in mid-wave, an unlit cigarette clamped between her index and middle fingers. "Can you drive her to the hotel?" the PA asked. I could see the hotel 1 block away, but this was my 4th job as a cast driver, so I knew how things were done in the movie business. "Sure thing," I said, and turning the ignition key. The PA shut the door and walked back toward the set. Through the rearview mirror, I saw Courtney look up at me. "Do you have a light?" she asked, waving her cigarette. "Yes," I said. I reached up behind me and flicked on the overhead light switch. A thin beam of white light appeared, shining down on Courtney's lap from the roof of the Suburban. I checked for oncoming traffic as I steered out of the parking lot and then glanced quickly at Courtney in the rearview mirror. The muscles in her face twitched with confusion and then disgust. She didn't ask again. I don't know why I flipped on the light. An inability to say, sorry, you can't smoke in this vehicle, to a famous person. Sideways sense of humor. But 2 days later, when I drove Courtney again, she didn't seem to recognize me. Either that or she didn't care to acknowledge a person too daft to know the difference between an overhead light and a cigarette light. This is a passage I'm going to read to you, but I'm telling you a lot about myself. I'd rather people didn't know, but I guess I wanted them to know it or I wouldn't put it in a book. Most people, after they hire me, tell me to eat anything you can find in the refrigerator or cupboards, and I take them at their word. After greeting the pets and setting my laptop bag on the dining room table, one of the first things I do is look inside the fridge and pantry. Even though I recognize this behavior as a habit formed long ago during my teenage babysitting years, it's a challenge to stop myself. As a growing tween and teen, I was constantly hungry. Yes, my parents fed me, but never enough. They were on a tight budget. I took babysitting jobs mostly so I could eat other people's food. The people I babysat for always told me to help myself to whatever I could find in the kitchen. At 5 feet 11 inches tall and weighing about 110 pounds, I'm sure I looked hungry. At the very least, way too skinny. But what a difference other people's kitchens were from my house, where my housewife mother guarded the food. She always seemed to be in the kitchen. And my frugal father did all grocery shopping, rationing the rations. I did not want to babysit. I had 6 younger siblings at home, for Pete's sake. Babysitter was my middle name. But I did want money, and I did want access to more food. During these past few months of near constant critter sitting, I've gained 15 pounds. Not because of how much I've eaten, but because of what I've eaten. In my condo, there are no chips, crackers, cookies, cold cereal, chocolate chips. Why does all the good stuff begin with the letter C? None of that in my cupboard, not even a loaf of bread. Buttered toast is my nemesis. There's no ice cream in my freezer, no cheeses, flavored yogurts, juice, milk, or pudding in the refrigerator. I have no willpower to resist any of that stuff. I will eat all of those foods before one vegetable goes into my mouth. In my 20s, I often went several days without eating a single vegetable. Not because I didn't like them, but because they were too much trouble to prepare. This was back in the days before we could buy bags of salad and pre-cut produce in the grocery stores. I had things to do, and my mouth yearns for the sensations of crunchy, sweet, salty, and creamy. In my 30s, after several cycles of gaining and losing many extra pounds, I stopped buying problem foods, mostly. So I don't keep any of the aforementioned in my own kitchen, but apparently most other people don't have food addiction issues. They can put whatever they want in their refrigerators and cupboards without hearing it constantly call out to them, eat me, eat me, eat me. These people who live in this house are active young professionals. One look inside their pantry, and I know I'm in trouble. The shelves are packed with Costco-sized containers of M&M, Cheez-Its, cookies, trail mix, several types of cold cereal, and a loaf of bread. Inside the fridge is a nearly full carton of milk to pour on the cold cereals. Cold cereal is my weakest food weakness. When floating in milk, it is simultaneously crunchy, sweet, salt, and creamy. There's also a pan of leftover lasagna, 5 different kinds of white and yellow cheeses, and a brick of cream cheese. Cheese is another of my worst weaknesses. On the bottom shelf of the fridge are 3 cartons of sugary fruit-flavored yogurt. The freezer contains several Ziploc bags full of bagels, cut in half and ready for the toaster, and a plastic container filled with chocolate chip cookies. In a large room on the lower level of the house, I discover what looks like the wine section of a small grocery store, covering most of one wall. The downstairs fridge is full of specialty beers, cans of sparkling water and sodas, and the ingredients for mixed drinks. Upstairs, there's a well-stocked liquor cabinet. They also told me to help yourself to wine, beer, and liquor. They had too much, they said, left over from their recent wedding. It's a good thing I don't have the physical ability to tolerate much alcohol. So I want to read you one more section, and this happened. It was actually my last pet sitting job, and you'll find out why. And it was right before Christmas, a couple weeks before Christmas, and I was staying with 2 young, energetic dogs, a Bernedoodle, who might have been 2 years old, and a German wire hair pointer named Billy. And the Bernedoodle's name was Cleaver, which was a really good name for him, as you'll find out. So I'm there, and I've got my laptop on the table. I'm trying to do some editing on a podcast, and the dogs are just being young, energetic dogs. There's no fence around this property, but beyond the backyard is a huge field that grows alfalfa during the summer. It's covered by 2 feet of snow. It looks like the perfect place for a romp, a place for them to burn off some of their young dog energy and get tired enough to take a nap while I finish my work. Before they left, the people told me Billy didn't need to be on a leash. She'll come back when you call her, the woman wrote in the text. But Cleaver needs to be on a leash whenever he's outside. I pull my winter boots on, snap a leash to Cleaver's collar, and open the back door. That's when the trouble begins. Billy takes off like she's been shot out of a cannon. Cleaver lunges after her, yanking me through the deep snow and across the yard. I stumble along as best I can, trying not to fall. We are nearly to the field when Cleaver charges through a stand of dried bull thistle. Every flower and stem on a bull thistle plant has a cluster of sharp, sturdy spines attached to it, some of which are very long. It's just about impossible to touch any part of a bull thistle plant without getting stabbed, sometimes deep enough to draw blood. The spines attach themselves to everything: gloves, leggings, furry boots, skin, dog hair, whatever they can get their sticky little hands on. Cleaver begins to bark and hop around like he's been stabbed with a hot poker, because he probably feels like he's been stabbed with a hot poker. His fur is dotted with clumps of thistle spikes, including a few near his eyes. My legs, gloves, and coat are covered with thistle heads and spines. Shit! Come on, Cleaver, I say, yanking on the leash. Let's go back to the house and get rid of these things. Shortest outdoor adventure ever. I yell for Billy. No Billy appears. I yell again and again. Still no Billy. So much for she'll come when you call her. I drag Cleaver to the back entryway of the house, tell him to sit, and begin pulling thistles off his fur. He squirms and whines. The thistles poke through my gloves and embed themselves into my fingers. Soon my back starts to ache. I stand up and stretch. I call for Billy again. She doesn't respond. Maybe she's sniffing through the bushes at the edge of the field, ignoring me, or she's run off. Whatever. I finally get most of the spines off Cleaver and let him back into the house. He starts chewing on his fur immediately, trying to get rid of the broken bits of thistle embedded in his skin. I sit down beside him to help. Suddenly, he starts to cough and spin in circles. He races through the house. I run after him, trying to calm him down, but he keeps spinning around and around like he's chasing his tail. except he's not chasing his tail. He's gagging and coughing and making ghastly, choking sounds. I realize now he must have swallowed some bits of thistle. I dash into the guest room to find my page of notes that includes emergency contact info. My level of panic escalates. What if he chokes to death before I can get him to the vet? By the time I rush back into the living room, Cleaver has stopped spinning. Now he's standing in front of the Christmas tree, biting at it. I watch with dismay as he puts a branch in his mouth, strips it with his teeth, and then chews and swallows the evergreen needles. OMG, what am I going to tell these people about their tree? I pace around the room, hitting my forehead with the palm of my hand. In more than 30 years of staying with hundreds of pets, this situation has never come up. Nothing even remotely close. I have no idea what to do. Should I drag him away from the tree, carry him to the car, and drive him to the vet? Am I strong enough to pick up a large, struggling, panicked dog and carry him across ice and snow in the driveway without falling and hurting both of us? Probably not. Most definitely not. I should call the vet to get advice. I grab my phone, find the emergency contact info, and start to punch in the number. But then I stop and watch as Cleaver frantically bites the tree, chews, and swallows. He knows what to do. He instinctively knows that eating pine needles will dislodge the thistle spines stuck in his throat. I just need to let him take care of himself. Okay, everything will be fine. Oh no, Billy! I run to the patio door, forgetting to put my coat on, and stumble through the snow, calling, Billy, Billy, where are you? Billy, come. Billy does not come. I dash back into the house and sprint to the living room. Cleaver is still eating the Christmas tree, but he is standing up and alive. I run back to the patio, grabbing my coat on the way, pulling it on as I rush out the door. No Billy in the yard. I hurry out to the front of the house and look left and right. No Billy anywhere on the street or in the front yards of the neighborhood houses. I run to the backyard again and stop to scan every bush, tree, and rock. German wire-haired pointer dogs are the color of fall and winter, a blend of brown, gray, and white. Even if, at this very moment, she was sniffing her way through the hedge of bushes bordering the yard, I probably couldn't see her. Billy, I yell again. Billy! Nothing moves anywhere in the yard or the field. I give up and hurry back into the house to check on Cleaver. He's still eating the tree, but seems less frantic, which is encouraging. I begin to feel slightly less frantic myself. And then, through the living room window, I see a brown, gray, white shape moving through the bushes. Billy! I sprint to the door. And then I quit pet sitting, and I went to California, and I sat on the beach and drank wine for 4 days. Any questions?
Why did you quit pet sitting?
Stuff like that. I quit because it's a 24-hour-a-day job, and I was getting some of my podcast editing business back, even though it had been wiped out by COVID. I was getting some new clients, and I'm also in a band, and whenever we would have a gig, it was ridiculously difficult from some of these places that were far out of town. It was really hard to give the dogs what they needed, pack up my stuff, get to the gig, set up, play the gig, stop by the grocery store and get back to them before all hell broke loose in the house. And a few incidents, like I came back to the house where I was. It was about 30 miles outside of Bozeman, between Bozeman and Livingston, or 30 minutes rather. The last 20 minutes was on a road that you can only go about 15 miles an hour because it was washboard gravel. And one of the dogs, there were 2 Irish setters, one of the dogs had opened the freezer and just left the door open, taken nothing out of the freezer, just opened the freezer door, and then had taken all of the bag of compostable stuff that I had in the sink, because it's bear country, you can't put it in a trash can, so I had to drive it down the mountain to a locked box. And she had strung it all over the house, you know, bits of Brussels sprouts and carrots and potatoes and whatever else was in there. And there were just, I mean, when you read the book, you'll find out all of the crazy things that happened. And part of it's the pets, and part of it was the people and their expectations, and just how far away the houses were from where I live, which is not in central Bozeman, but it's, you know, it's in the Bozeman city limits. And so, and then for all of that stress and all of that drive time and the gas money and everything, even though I could eat their free food, it worked out to about $4 an hour. And I just said, why am I doing this? Why? And for a year, I hardly ever slept in my own bed, and it was just highly stressful. So that's part of the reason I quit. And these dogs that I just told you about, they also took the handmade wooden ornaments off the tree, and the German wire hair pointer chewed them all up into little tiny slivers. And then they pulled all the lights off the tree when I wasn't looking. It was just
They sound like little kids.
Yes, absolutely.
Do these people know you were writing about them in your book?
All the names were changed. All the dogs' names were changed.
Houses probably.
And
Description, though.
I don't think there are a couple pages in here when I say, you know, I really like to read, and I like to sit and drink tea in the morning and think about things and meditate on the state of the world and whatever. But I like to read. You got to have a reading light and a comfy chair to do that. And they were in these monstrous houses that I was staying in. There was hardly, I couldn't find a lamp most of the time. So I couldn't read in bed. I couldn't read in a chair in the living room or anything. It was just, foreign environment to me, even though I appreciated the beauty of the structures. It just wasn't my kind of place to be. Yes.
Memoir-wise, why did you focus on this part of your life? And then, in terms of your character, what's the arc of your development in the book, you know, emotionally and psychologically?
Wow. How am I going to answer that?
I mean, it is a memoir.
It is a memoir, and it focuses primarily on 1 year of my life, but it also brings in all those things like food when I was a kid, and riding a motorcycle with a German Shepherd, and working in the film industry. And it comes in just as I'm reminded of it when I'm writing the stories. And the reason I wrote the stories is because I'd be at dinner with friends and I'd be telling them what was happening with whatever pets I was with, and they just kept saying, you have to write a book, you have to write a book. And I'd written lots of magazine articles and newspaper columns and things like that, but I hadn't written a book yet. So I gave myself 90 days to write at least 90 minutes a day, and I finished it in a first draft in 83 days. So as far as the arc of my character, I started out trying to find a way to make money after COVID wiped out my income. I was editing podcasts where the audio was generated at live events. And so the live events would happen and the producers would send me the audio, and then I would have to work. When the whole world shut down, all the live events went away and I had no more work. So I had to find a way to make some income. And I thought, when someone who had way too much pet sitting business called me, I thought, sure, I can do that. I've done it lots of times. But I'd never done it as a profession before. I'd never done it full time. and I would never do it full-time again. I take care of 2 friends' doodles and my daughter's dogs, and that's it. Don't ask me. Many people do, still. So what I learned my character arc was, there are some things that's just not worth doing no matter how much you're being paid. And you have to factor in all the stresses that go along with the job.
I thought it was interesting to hear all the stories and how you ended up getting to know, really know, because there are stories where you say this is it, but then, you still say yes to the next one. And so I found that really, it helped me quit my dog sitting business, finally getting to the know, because it is so challenging in ways that you don't think that it is. And I just found it so relatable. But then, and also that piece of like how hard it is to say no to this, and also being secure in the other, pieces of income or pieces of your life, to be able to put that one down that is for sure, to these other things that were just coming back. I really resonated with that.
I'm glad that it resonated with you, because a lot of people say to me, oh yeah, I've been thinking about doing that sitting. And then they come to a reading or they read my book and they go, oh, maybe not.
Is music still part of your everyday thing, and are your CDs available?
Oh, I don't have any CDs. Right now, for the last 5 years, I've been playing with 3 friends. We all play ukuleles, and it sounds like a dorky band, but it's not. We play mostly classic rock and roll. So we play Grateful Dead, Pink Floyd. We play stuff from the 20s and 30s, and we just really have a blast. So that's mostly what my music is right now, although I do have a keyboard and a digital audio workstation and some projects in mind. So those I'll be working on probably in the winter. I have a song about a dog. I'll probably put it on YouTube.
That sounds like your next book. Are you working on another book?
I am. I wrote another book which was telling people how they can record their stories, like their family stories and stuff. But it's just a small book. I just put together a bunch of my blog posts and made a book out of it. The book I think I'm going to go back to is one I started working on when I was producer of The Right Question, when I was interviewing 40, 45 authors a year, and all of their stories were so interesting. And I started writing a hybrid memoir that was about my interviews and about the authors and their books, and was also about me. And the feedback I got from publishers and agents was, I don't know how to think about it, which means they didn't know which category to file it in the bookstore or in their minds or whatever. And so I wrote about 180 pages, and then I just got discouraged and gave up. And I just edited a podcast last week where the host interviewed an author named Matthew Spector, and he had done exactly what I started to do 12 years ago. And he grew up in LA, in Hollywood, in Malibu Beach is where he lived. And his father was an agent, a movie agent, and his mother was a screenwriter. So he has access to a lot more people and famous people's stories than I do. But a lot of the authors that I interviewed were not insignificant, Thomas McGuane, Barry Lopez, Paul McLean. I interviewed quite a few people that you'd recognize their names. And I was kind of looking at their work and their lives and bringing my own life into that and thinking on the page about parallels. So anyway, I might go back to that project because evidently somebody bought something that was like it, so there's hope.
The marketing part sucks. Figuring that out.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I know, since you brought up interviewing, how do you shape or cast an interview for a broadcast, which you hope is going to be entertaining for an audience, versus the kind of interviewing one does as a journalist or biographer, where one is like really digging for answers, being confrontational, repeating questions, in other words, doing everything but being entertaining.
Yeah, I don't do that.
But how do you do the other?
First, I make the person feel comfortable because nobody's going to talk to me unless they feel comfortable. And also, I'm curious about who they are and why they wrote something and, you know, why they wrote a particular thing. So that was step number one. And a lot of times we'd be done with the interview and they wouldn't even know we started because we just sit down at the table and while we're doing a mic check, then I just started asking them questions. And I always, while I was doing my research on the person and reading their book, when I was making my interview notes, I would create a story arc. I want to go from here, and then I want something to like peak in the middle, and then I want to end it with something poignant or humorous or whatever. And that's the way all good stories happen. And so I was just telling an audio story, but it's still a story.
Yeah.
When you were all of these dogs sitting places, do you feel like the dogs kind of gave you an insight into the humans? For better or worse?
Like the woman with the German Shepherds, for example. She was living probably, if you were going to drive, it would take you 10 minutes to get to her nearest neighbor. She had a husband, but they were both very active and they both had businesses and they did things together and they looked like they were fine as far as I was concerned, but they also did a lot of things apart and he was gone a lot on his thing and she was a big fly fisher woman and so she would go out by herself. When she was in that house by herself, she did not want those dogs to not be aggressive. She wanted them to kill anybody who came to the door who she didn't know why they were there. So that told me a lot about her. And there were other dogs that I found out things about just the way they behaved. Like one dog would come and scratch on my legs when I was sitting at the counter trying to do work, and I couldn't figure out what this dog wanted. Well, it wanted to be in my lap, and I looked it up on the internet, and it was absolutely a dog that needed to be in somebody's lap at all times. And I find it difficult to work and eat with a dog in my lap. So just little things gave me clues about the people.
Well, and you wonder a lot of the times too, people get dogs and probably shouldn't be getting dogs because they don't have time to spend.
Because they're never home. Yeah. Yeah, and dogs act different when their people are gone. They really do. Very different.
Do you still like dogs?
I love dogs. I've always loved dogs. I like cats too. Not so fond of chickens, but my daughter has chickens, so I take care of them. I could walk into the pen and I found out if you have toenail polish on, they will peck at your feet because they like shiny things. So now I go out in Crocs. I like animals a lot.
Did you become emotionally connected to any of the animals that you watched?
I became emotionally connected to all of them because I felt like in order to take good care of them and to keep them feeling safe and happy, I needed to have a strong emotional connection with them. Yeah. I talked to them constantly, took their pictures. First thing I do when I drove up to a place was make all the animals pose and take a picture and let the people know I was there. But I got a lot of really good pictures.
I think humor is one of the hardest things to write. Do you have anything you want to say about even your process or anything about writing humor?
I don't know, I guess I don't take myself too seriously because life is just ridiculous no matter what way you look at it. And I do dumb things all the time, and I watch other people do dumb things, and then they go, oh, they try to pretend like it didn't happen. And it's just like, I'm an idiot, so what? So I don't know. I don't try to write humor. It's just the way it comes out, because it's just all crazy, especially when you're around animals. I took care of, my daughter has 3 cats and 2 dogs and 6 chickens, and I took care of them over the 4th of July, which is the most fun time to be with dogs who are scared of fireworks. But, you know, we all slept in the bed like this with a sound machine on, but they have a cat that's an indoor cat, but when it goes outside, the whole yard sounds different. And they live on 3/4 of an acre, and so I would always know when the cat was coming back toward the house because the crows would be all out there going, so it's being aware of the environment you're in and not taking it too seriously. Does anybody have any questions about writing? Is anybody working on something? Or struggling to work on something? Or wish they were working on something? Elise, are you working on another book?
I'm always working on something. Humor, I think, I mean, my humor is always really dry and droll, and I really love reading, you know, laugh out loud humor. I think it's just amazing. Hillary does that really well too.
Okay, time to drink beer.
Thank you. Like now I don't ever want to like get into pet sitting when in my retirement. So thank you for this.
I probably had 5 or 6 or 7 people say that to me after reading.
A good pet sitter is very hard to find that you can rely on.
Yeah. Well, you know, somebody else might have a different experience than me, so I say go for it if you want to, and I'll connect you with the person who was giving me all the jobs. She probably still needs somebody.
Thank you.